Alrighty then. Well, welcome to the folks that are here with us today. So my name is Krupa, and I'm your host. This is the Queer Muslim and in the Burbs panel. So I work at the Kenneth Young Center in Schaumburg, Illinois. This program today is coming specifically out of our LGBTQ Center, which opened last November in Schaumburg. And you might know our LGBTQ Center team lead, Donna B., who is working behind the scenes today in tech support. Donna will also appear for a few of the segments today as well. So I'm super excited that everybody's here because we have three awesome guests, Hiba, Zora, and Ronnie, who will be speaking to their experiences growing up in the northwest suburbs of Chicago as queer Muslims. So today is going to be an awesome talk. So who is this panel for? When Donna and I were working on it, our intention was that this panel would be for anyone young or old, therapists, community organizers, those who work with the LGBTQ population / every population. I think that a lot of this work also connects to Muslims, people from the regions, the large geographical regions of the Middle East, South Asia, East Africa, etc. And specifically, though, we're doing this work for many marginalized communities because these communities are often overlooked, under resources, and this event is a great opportunity to open the door to build our capacity and understanding of one another. So the panel has three folks who are participating. These folks are, again, Ronnie, Hiba, and Zora. And I wanted to give them a chance to introduce themselves. Feel free to share your name, your gender pronoun, how you identify racially or ethnically, where you grew up, and what high school you went to. And so feel free to speak not popcorn style, but whenever you'd like.
Thanks, Krupa. My name is Hiba. I grew up in the city and the suburbs, specifically Albany Park, Hoffman Estate, Algo Village, and La Velita, Little Village. I identify as an Afro-South Indian, Pakistani, and Indo-Arab, and a queer Muslim. I use she and they pronouns.
Hi, my name is Zora. I go by she, her pronouns. I grew up in Chicago and the northwest suburbs. So my family lived in the city until I was like a toddler, and then we moved to the suburbs initially in Mount Prospect, and then we moved to Hoffman Estates, which is basically where I grew up. I attended Conant High School. I identify as an Indian Muslim queer woman who is the daughter of Indian immigrants.
Hi folks, I'm Ronnie. My pronouns are she, her. Identify as Pakistani Muslim or Desi, and I'm queer. I grew up primarily in the suburbs, so suburbs of Chicago, namely Hoffman Estates and Schaumburg, and I also went to Conant High School, class of 2015.
I wanted to ask, how would you all describe growing up in Hoffman?
Yeah, for me, my family has struggled with financial precarity and like being on food stamps, etc. Because and I think about the word poverty, and if that's the correct term to describe what we've gone through, because we're only poor in relation to capitalism and this idea of middle classness, a middle classness that prioritizes whiteness and people who ascribe to wanting to become white in some way. So yeah, I grew up on food stamps. I grew up with, one parent working, other people in my family having mental health issues. And the suburbs are not talked about like that. That the poor people actually live there. That while that we constantly have to deal with whiteness in this way in the suburbs. That's almost surveilling us.
Like, I grew up in mostly immigrant neighborhoods. Like, the majority of my life, I was surrounded by other like Desi folks. We had a few Black families, we had a few Latinx families, and like maybe like a sprinkling of white families, but it was mostly Desi where I grew up. And from what I remember, like both my parents, they've always worked since I was a kid. Only recently did my mom not like leave work because of like COVID. So we're lucky that like, because I'm working and my dad's working, like we're able to make a living. And like it's nice that like we don't have to depend on her income anymore. What else? Yeah, I mean, I remember being surrounded by other brown faces, which was kind of cool in one way, because like it kind of helped my parents out a lot with like keeping their kids rooted in the culture, right? Because like they came here in the late 80s. So I was like, I'm part of the first generation born and raised in the US within my family, along with like my younger brother. So we also were fortunate where like we had a lot of familial support. Like we had one of my uncles actually like helped with the immigration process, because like he established himself in the US, and then we were able to immigrate over through like the family visa stuff, which is how a lot of people have come to the US from like my experience, like within what I grew up around. And like that's something that is being affected today with the politics around immigration now. But yeah, I mean, I remember I never felt like we like our family struggled, but I did know that we weren't exactly rich, but like we were definitely working class folks. Like I remember like Abu used to be a cab driver for quite some time, like almost all the way through my high school education, and then like he was able to change careers, and but it's still like relatively blue collar stuff that he's doing.
I remember coming here and being like, all right, I see a lot of people that look like me, and in my 15-year-old head I was like, this is diversity and this is really diverse. And what I think I kind of learned growing up here is that this idea of a suburb being whitewashed can seem kind of relative, and it is, but what I learned is that notion of it being whitewashed has less to do with like population demographics and how many white faces there are, and more to do with like which narrative is prioritized and what voices are louder. And in that case, it's white issues and white voices and white stories. And so even though I was this brown girl surrounded by other brown girls and brown people and people that look like me, it didn't really feel authentic. And I didn't really have this feeling of pride in my culture or identity, something I kind of ran away from for a really long time.
When it comes to GSAs, I wanted to ask, in your high schools, was there a GSA? If so, what was your experience? If not, how would you describe queerness in your educational experience?
And so what happened was I found out through a friend, and it was basically like an unofficial club. We did still have like an instructor, like a teacher who was an advisor, but like we were definitely not like listed as one of the clubs for the school at Conant. And like I remember I think it was like my senior year. So I found out about it my sophomore, junior year, and then like junior, senior year. I was able to help us get like the tabling, and that was a big deal at that time. So this is like 2006, 2007. So getting a table to be able to tell people, hey, we're here, like we exist. There's a club if you're interested, and trying to like find some community. Like that was a big deal. I don't know if Conant still does it or not, or if other high schools do this, like where all the student orgs kind of like have a day of trying to get people to join their clubs and organizations. But like, yeah, I remember us getting a table was like a big deal at that time. So it was definitely minimal, but if at all, you know, visible at that time.
I actually only know that there is one, and there was one when I was in high school because I Googled it sometime this month. And so I didn't even know that Conant had that, which I think is telling. But
I want to ask if you all could share what you thought, think about the narrative of coming out.
Narrative of coming out is very Christian and very like white, upper middle class, and like energy, because like even the idea of like coming out of the closet presupposes that there is a closet to come out of. A lot of like poor people, working class people don't have this quote unquote closet, aka extra space where they can stand and hide and then come out of.
I want to go off of what Hiba is saying, that like, yeah, I definitely agree that definitely growing up, like, you know, post 9/11, because at that time I was 12 when 9/11 happened. And so my first like I guess concern was not being attacked for being Muslim versus like trying to figure out my sexuality and my identities, you know, like in that way. And so I definitely do agree that coming out is a narrative of privilege to some degree. Like, and it doesn't, and like it changes, you know, it shifts, because like right now, yeah, things are have definitely, I think, shifted a bit, but like overall in the US at least, but I don't think that means that everyone fits into that narrative.
Yeah, these are really great personal narratives and perspectives that you all are sharing. I think that in some LGBTQ spaces, there is such an enormous push to be very out about queerness in a way that reads as queer to a lot of white and middle class people. And I really hear it in many of your stories that that approach does not work for everybody. And if we perpetuate it, it really keeps a lot of people invisibilized. And it makes me think about GSAs and other places where queer youth gather, and how much we or advisors or others might ask each other to out themselves in a way that feels, you know, in a way that's very normative. I wanted to jump to another question. So when it comes to your personal experiences, what memories stand out to you when you think about your religion and your gender, sexuality, and identity?
I remember as a child, you know, not really a child, but like a teenager, probably like senior, it was like near the end of high school, beginning of college, like I was at my aunt's house, and she like, I think because my parents were aware that I was involved in like the GSA, but like they were like, I wasn't sure, you know, so there was a lot of there's a lot of unknowns, I guess, in their minds. So for some reason, my aunt, like I was with my cousins, and like she started telling us the story of Lot, like the one that Hiba just talked about, and I was like very adamant, like, yeah, but that's not what the story is about, though. Like the story is about like it's about rape. It's about like not consenting, and like that's the actual evil, you know. Like it's fine if it's intimacy between you know, consenting people, consenting adults, and it was just like this argument that I had. And so like that is something that's definitely been used. I've definitely heard it like in Christian context as well. my struggle mostly with Islam has been against more like ignorance than anything else. Personally, I feel as far as my relationship as a queer Muslim woman, like I feel like I never felt ostracized by my religion. I definitely have felt some I don't know what the right word to use is, but like some difficulties, I guess, with other Muslims, but I never had any doubt regarding my faith. Like I had no doubt growing up that like if you're telling me that, you know, I grew up with this mentality that Allah created everything in perfection, and therefore if you're saying something's wrong with me, you're saying that Allah made a mistake, and you can't say Allah is perfect and then say Allah makes mistakes. You know, like you can't have it both ways. So like this isn't a struggle that you deal with your faith. Like this is not supposed to be an internal jihad, right? Like jihad is literally a struggle, and like a lot of people relate that to like religious war, but it's really about your internal struggle within yourself with trying to be a better person with as a Muslim, especially. And like I don't feel like being a queer woman makes me a bad person or a bad Muslim. Like I feel like I'm here, I exist for a reason, and you can't tell me that Allah doesn't like me, doesn't love me, because that was what I grew up with. I was raised with a God of love and patience, not one of wrath. And it's interesting to me because in Islam there are 99 names for Allah, and like almost all of them, like 95 of them are kind. They're about, you know, patience and mercy and forgiveness, you know, like all these positive aspects that we want to see within ourselves as well, and we would hope would come from our religious community too.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like stories or things like that, I mean, I don't really remember like my parents or family telling me the story of like Sodom and Gomorrah, but I mean, I remember hearing of it, but more so, I think the lessons I was taught or the things that I remember were very like underlying. Or like I remember being a kid and being told that like the prevalence of homosexuality was like a sign that the world was gonna end, and just things like that. And then a specific memory I have was being at the mall with my mom and like walking past a Sephora, and this guy was working there and he was wearing makeup, and my mom and I walked past, and she was just like toba toba, which is, it's like the tisk tisk of every Muslim parent ever. It's like repentance, but basically I just remember the feeling that gave me was like, without saying any like a word or a sentence, my mom taught me that that's wrong, and that it brings shame, and then also being conflicted with this feeling of like, why is it wrong, and thinking he looked really good, and so yeah, like the homophobia that I think was taught, it wasn't a super blatant thing, but it was definitely just this underlying theme in like the little comments and like glares and things like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's definitely been a lot more like toned down. It's a lot of hinting and kind of skirting around the issue than anything. Like
Yeah.
blatantly like, oh, you know, gays are horrible or whatever. And I'm like, that comment about, you know, homosexuality is one of the signs of the end of the world. Like then the world would have ended.
Yeah.
Thousands of years ago, that was the case. Like we've been around. We are here.
At the Kenneth Young Center, we provide a lot of substance use prevention services, recovery services, as well as many other mental health services to the community. And I know that even though in Islam it's encouraged for folks to not use alcohol or drink alcohol, substance use addiction does exist in Muslim communities. I most recently read about the opioid overdose crisis, negatively influencing Somali communities and Oromo communities in Minneapolis, as well as other Muslim communities in Dearborn. So with that said, everybody, I wanted to ask if any of the panelists here have any perceptions or experiences regarding substance use and recovery in your community.
For me personally, growing up in a Muslim immigrant family, like a lot of the things that would probably be seen as like an impediment, it kind of helped me figure myself out. Like the fact that like we didn't really talk about queerness, we didn't really talk about drugs and stuff beyond don't drink alcohol. Like even that wasn't even said, it was just an assumption, because like as a Muslim, you're not supposed to drink. Like that's like a common thread amongst Muslims, I believe. Like we're raised to not become intoxicated, not to lose our senses. I think like I do drink as a Muslim person. Like I am a Muslim who drinks, but like I'm also
is that like I just want to jump in really quick about alcohol.
Yeah.
I think that, while yes, a lot of Muslim communities do not encourage consumption of alcohol, some Muslim communities actually do drink alcohol, and specifically drink wine. I think even when we say like Muslims typically don't drink alcohol, I think like that could be a trend about not everyone, like not every Muslim does not drink. Like some Muslims do drink alcohol, and I think the best way, if you are non-Muslim or you're not familiar with how, if you are a Muslim and you're not familiar with how what other Muslims do, is just to be like, hey, like what kind of beverage do you prefer? And if they drink, they'll tell you what they want. Like
right, exactly.
Like that's the best way, I think, personally for me to think about what alcohol is to our communities, because it's not, we don't all have the same relationship with it.
Yeah, that's where I was getting to. Like I am one of those Muslims who does drink, but like I definitely started way later. Like I was actually like of legal age when I started drinking, and I think because I was raised in my household, like to, you know, make sure you're aware and you're in your surroundings. Like I am more of a social drinker for that reason. I think like I've learned what my limits are, and I don't enjoy getting drunk, you know, like how a lot of people might use alcohol for. They might like that sensation. For me personally, it's just more like, hey, okay, this is one more thing I can do to like, you know, make other people feel comfortable, I guess, to some degree, if we're in a mixed crowd, so to speak, as far as alcohol is concerned. I personally haven't had like much struggle with addiction, but I've known a lot of friends who have, and I think because of their upbringing was similar to mine, like they've definitely hidden it. They've definitely like tried to keep it on like the down low, so to speak, regarding their alcoholism and substance abuse. But fortunately, most of them have had families that were supportive, and like we're able to assist them in finding help to, you know, like whether it was therapy or rehab, like whatever it was that they needed. Like, so they've been fortunate in that respect, because like we don't, at least in my family, like I didn't grow up with a lot of, oh, we should go to therapy. Like that was never even a thing. Like therapy was seen as like something for quote unquote white people. Like that's something that's for other people, not for our community. And so like even growing up, like there was a stigma against it, against like mental health stuff. And so I know that we're like running a little bit lower on time, so I'm trying to finish up this thought real quick. But like even as an adult now, like I understand, like it took a while to get to the point where, you know, I was like comfortable accepting therapy as an option, even because of all that stigma I was raised with. So, you know, and then also being queer, Muslim, having all these intersectionalities, like it makes it difficult to find someone who can kind of relate to your experience. So finding a therapist is its own hurdle in that respect. I feel like it's kind of like, okay, just find somebody who's close enough, who's basically at least culturally aware. I don't want to say culturally sensitive, because your sensitivity doesn't really matter to me. Like you need to be aware of what your what advice you're giving to people, I guess, right? Like how you're going to relate to people is really what matters. And not coming in with presumptions of that person's identity is important to me. So, you know, that those two are kind of their own hurdles, but it is important to know that like there are options out there. It might be a little bit harder to find someone exactly what you're looking for, but there are people from what I know. And I know I have some friends who are like trying to work towards becoming those people, like who are supports for our community in that regard, like queer Muslim folks who are trying to get into the mental health industry field, so that there are people who can relate.
I just think the running theme with like difficult conversations, I think Zora, you mentioned this, is these conversations are kind of avoided at all costs. We don't really, it doesn't feel like at least in my experience, the community really openly acknowledges the prevalence or discussing the realities of substance use. So it already kind of puts you at a disadvantage when or if that becomes a part of your life. So again, you not knowing where to go or who to confide in or what to do at all in a lot of instances. And then in the instances where you do go to your family or your parents, it can be shamed. And even then, if your parents do want to help you, they don't know where to go or who to refer you to. And then further, your parents can't really reach out to others in your community for the same, for risk of that same like shame and rejection. And so I feel like what happens is that the issue just gets further exacerbated within the walls of the home. And so like the parents will scold and reprimand, and the child will further be burdened by their parents' expectations and orders, and they might seek more relief in these substances. And so I think it can be cyclical because of this underlying issue of just not knowing, or one, not being an open conversation, but also just not knowing where to go or where to turn to.
Yeah, most definitely. I found it consistent, as you said, Ronnie, that as everybody said, you know, that sometimes the resources that are available for people who are struggling with addiction are not culturally aware, as Zora, you said. I also feel like, as Hiba, or I think as Zora was saying, that when a person is under so much stress, if the only thing that is if the only resource that is in their periphery is to use substances, there's a lot to examine and unpack around that. When we are trying to figure out community-driven solutions to substance use, addiction recovery. I do want to share that there are a lot of folks who do take advantage of Alcoholics Anonymous, Smart Recovery. There's also another Muslim AA program called 12 Steps of Milati Islami. So there are a lot of resources that do cater to Muslims, and there are a lot of resources that cater, not a lot, but there are some resources that cater to Muslims and some resources that cater to the LGBTQ people. But I do think that there's a lot of work to create resources that work while also addressing the fact that poverty, sexual assault, homophobia, transphobia does push a lot of people over the edge and pushes people to find ways to cope with unbearable trauma. So with this panel, we are about at 4 minutes, and I want to say thank you to all of our awesome panelists, Zora, Ronnie, and Hiba, for speaking today.